No, especially with all this. Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this adjourned meeting of the Enterprise Committee for Wednesday, March 7th. My name is Lene Palmisano, and I'm the chair of this committee. With me here on the dais are Council Members Goodman, Vice Chair Cano, Council Member Fletcher, Council Member Reich, and Council Member Warsami. We have a quorum of this committee. We've also been chaired by Council Member Jeremy Schrader and Mayor Fry. Colleagues, the only item of business today is the continuation of a public hearing that was begun at our last regular meeting and was continued to this afternoon. That hearing is on the proposed reappointment of Susan Siegel as city attorney. Before we open the floor for further testimony, I'd like to note that we will be taking speakers in the order in which they are registered. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to go sign in with the clerk. Each speaker will have only 2 minutes to address this committee. Also, if you have printed materials to submit as part of the public record on the matter, we ask that you please give those materials to the clerk, and they'll be shared amongst all council members. Once we've heard from all speakers in the order that they've registered, I'll ask if there are any further speakers before closing the public hearing. At that time, anyone who has not already addressed the committee and wishes to do so can have that opportunity. With that, I now open the floor for the continuation of our public hearing. The first 3 speakers in order are Robert Lilligren, Dave Bicking, and Jordan Kushner. Mr. Lilligren, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Bujun and Denoy Maganaduk, greetings, my relatives. I want to say, Chi Miigwech, thank you very much for this opportunity to address you today and to speak in support of the reappointment of Susan Siegel as the Minneapolis City Attorney. I had the great opportunity to work with Ms. Siegel from 2008 to the end of 2013 as City Attorney, and out in different roles in the community, I've had the opportunity to continue that work and that collaboration. And I want to speak briefly to both of those time periods. And in my experience, Ms. Siegel has always been thoughtful, thorough, bold, fair, and considerate. And in my experience, she's always put the good of this organization, the government of the city of Minneapolis, and the good of the people in the forefront. In City Hall, it seemed like Susan and I worked on a lot of big reform pieces, whether that was reforming regulatory services or community engagement or introducing renewable energy policies and negotiating an agreement with our energy providers and opposing a high voltage power line. And these were super complicated, multi-level efforts that have lots of moving parts. And I always found that she provided the legal underpinning and the legal framework that I needed to do the policy work, and that kind of liberated me from that level of work. And I always was confident in the information that she provided me, and felt that she contributed to my making better decisions. In the community, I've had the opportunity to work with her mostly in my role as interim CEO at Little Earth, in both the Domestic Violence Hotspot Initiative, where she listened to the community and adjusted the way that she was doing the work to the community's benefit, and with the Burn Grant, bringing federal dollars into the Little Earth community, and this relationship that she's helped establish between the Little Earth community and the city government of Minneapolis has been tremendously valuable. And so, miigwech again for this opportunity to address you, and I urge you to support the reappointment of Susan Siegel. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Thank you, Mr. Lilligren. Next, we will have Dave Bicking, and then we have Jordan Kushner and Daniel Romero. Mr. Bicking.
Hello, Dave Bicking, 4200 Cedar Avenue South in Minneapolis. It's hard to say something in 2 minutes when, frankly, I could think of about 24 reasons to oppose the reappointment of Susan Siegel. It's been mentioned the good work at over $150,000 a year salary. I expect that pretty much as a baseline. But Susan Siegel has cost the city far more than that. She is responsible for 3 denials of referendums, denials of direct democracy here in the city. The first one, the Viking Stadium, obviously, is costing the city $150 million plus interest. We would have that money for other purposes if the people had been allowed to vote on that. On the police insurance amendment that I was involved in, her maneuvering stalled the vote by the city council until the absolute last moment, giving us 1 day to prepare a Supreme Court brief and 1 day for the Supreme Court to rule in a very political decision that took them over 6 months to write a justification for. Because this failed, we don't have the means to get rid of the really bad rogue cops in the city that are costing the city hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of them in settlements over and over and over again. That has also resulted in great harm to the community. I've talked to you about process. Something I'll note, when I served on the Civilian Review Authority, thank you. At every meeting of that, we had a representative there from the city attorney's office, just as you always have a representative at your meetings. When we did something that was wrong, that violated our rules or our process, and I'll admit we did that occasionally, that city attorney was always quick to correct us, as they should have done. Susan Siegel has been at every one of these meetings, and sometimes representatives from the city attorney's office, and on our own reappointment. She has let this go through in a process which I think now has been frustrating for all of you in terms of how it's been rushed and it's been difficult for you to hear from the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Jordan Kushner, Daniel Romero, and after that will be Brian Elliott. Mr. Kushner.
Thank you. My name is Jordan Kushner. I'm speaking on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild Minnesota chapter. We previously submitted a letter to all the council members stating our position on the reappointment. And let me just move on from that, which I think that the point there's discussion about, well, Susan Siegel is just representing the city of Minneapolis. And our position is we picked specific examples where she engaged in actions that were at her discretion that went either exceeded what she should have done on behalf of the city of Minneapolis or were her own independent decisions. The position that she took on the Viking Stadium, that it wasn't subject to a referendum because it wasn't the $150 million being charged to Minneapolis residents wasn't a tax, was a bogus legal position that Judge Phil Bush recognized. That went above and beyond her ethical responsibilities, actually violated her ethical responsibilities as an attorney to take an unbased position in order to advance what the mayor's agenda was at the time. It was something that exceeded her or violated her responsibilities as a legal officer. Subsequently, she had no responsibility to accept free Vikings tickets from the Minnesota Stadium Authority and corporate luxury box seats on 2 different occasions. That violates Minneapolis Ethics Ordinance 15.50, where people who are city officials cannot accept things of value from entities that are doing business with the city. Clear violation of ethics. These tickets are each worth thousands of dollars. That's a substantial breach, especially coming from the city attorney. The fact that the mayor also took those tickets doesn't make it appropriate. The city attorney exercised her discretion in all of the criminal prosecution. We've outlined specific cases where she excessively charged activists or pursued prosecutions of activists that didn't have any basis. And we can get a new city attorney in office who's meets appropriate standards. Thank you.
Mr. Kushner, thank you. I notice you don't have an address listed, so if you could please give that privately to the clerk before you leave.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Daniel Romero.
Good afternoon, Council, Mr. Mayor. Before I give my testimony, it's important for me to say to you that most of you know me in my capacity serving with different organizations in the community and as a minister, but it's important that I clarify that I'm not here representing any organization. I'm here as a private citizen in my individual capacity, and it's in that capacity that I testify to you this morning. I support the mayor's appointment, nomination of Ms. Siegel, and I urge you to support her reappointment as well. I found Ms. Siegel to be someone who cares deeply about community-related issues, and particular those of immigrants. And you know very well of her support and leadership around the U visa certification process that we passed just a couple of months ago, along with Ms. Glidden's leadership and Ms. Lopez's leadership. And were it not for Ms. Siegel's support, it's likely that that folks who are in jeopardy of deportation because of not having a specific certification process, that those folks would continue to be in jeopardy. I've also found, so I lift that up as just one example. I want to say as well that in my brief time in Minneapolis, I found Ms. Siegel to be accessible. I found her to be honest and straightforward. We have many other issues that are before the council now. And changing horses in midstream simply would not serve Minneapolis residents, in my view. In closing, I would like to say to Ms. Siegel and to all of you, I'm just now seeing the Communities United Against Police Brutalities letter. And I would just ask you, all of you, Ms. Siegel specifically, to address those issues that are raised in that letter. These are important and significant issues, and they deserve to be addressed. I urge you to support her reappointment nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. If you could also give your address to the city clerk when you have a chance, as it's not listed here on this sign-in sheet. Next, we have Mr. Brian Elliott, followed by Anna Odegard and Cynthia Protec. I also want to mention that we've been joined on the dais a little while ago by Council Vice President Jenkins and more recently Councilmember Ellison. So thank you for joining us. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, council members, mayor. My name is Brian Elliott. I'm a resident of the 11th Ward and the executive director of the SEIU Minnesota State Council, representing approximately 8,000 people who work or live in Minneapolis, many of whose employers would be paying minimum wage with no benefits, but for those workers having joined together in a union. Meanwhile, the plight of their non-union peers has really only been improved in large part by your action, the actions of this city in crafting, passing, defending, and implementing strong workplace standards in which Ms. Siegel has played a significant role. It's because of that work and having seen the difference for workers in Minneapolis compared to St. Paul that I'm here to speak in favor of Susan Siegel's reappointment as city attorney. Once Ms. Siegel and her staff had successfully defended the right of Minneapolis to have workplace ordinances like sick and safe time, some of my members' employers rolled out those standards to all of their employees, regardless of location. While others of my members have been able to bargain similar policies statewide, precisely because of the successful defense of this ordinance. Also, the close partnership between City Attorney Siegel and the Civil Rights Department from drafting to implementation has proven a sharp contrast to St. Paul, where intentionally vague ordinance language from that city's attorney, combined with timid guidance, has left many employers confused about their responsibilities and left many of my members without the same sick coverage as other workers. While in Minneapolis, we've been able to rely on this partnership to provide unwavering clarity to employers about their responsibility. Finally, the ongoing work by City Attorney Siegel to defend the city's right to enforce workplace ordinances based on where the work is performed rather than a corporate office should continue without interruption. If the city were to fail to prevail in that case, it would create perverse incentives for businesses to relocate or turn to often fly-by-night service contractors based outside the city. I believe that City Attorney Siegel is the best choice to continue to defend the city's workplace ordinances, be a strong partner for the Civil Rights Department, and to craft for you the strongest policies to support the workers of this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anna Odegard, Cynthia Protec, and Cassandra Holmes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council, and Mayor Fry. My name is Anna Odegard, and I am the legislative advocate with the Minnesota Asset Building Coalition. We're a coalition of nonprofit organizations, primarily direct service providers working with low-income Minnesotans throughout the state. Thank you for the opportunity to support the reappointment of Ms. Siegel and to speak for just a moment about her office's leadership in addressing the disparate impact of court fines and fees on low-income Minnesotans. As I think everybody knows, the U.S. Justice Department's report on the Ferguson Police Department in 2015 made a compelling case that fines and fees from traffic and minor criminal violations strip assets from low-income communities and communities of color. That can lead to escalating debt and criminal records for low-income residents. When the Asset Building Coalition started working on this issue in 2016, we started by looking for allies. We needed to identify who had the expertise and motivation to take the lead role in analyzing the issue, developing proposals, and advocating for change. And we found that ally with the City of Minneapolis. City Attorney Susan Siegel and her team recognized the disparate impact of fines and fees and had already begun identifying possible areas for reform. I worked with the City of Minneapolis to convene an informal team of stakeholders, and we were incredibly fortunate that Ms. Siegel designated Mary Ellen Hang, the Deputy City Attorney, to work with our team. Ms. Hang was instrumental in providing data, legal expertise, and her personal feedback from her perspective working as a prosecutor. With her guidance and input, we developed legislative proposals to give courts discretion to reduce or waive the $75 state surcharge in cases of financial hardship, and to require judges to consider a person's ability to pay before sentencing a person to pay a fee, fine, or surcharge. We also developed a proposal to eliminate driver's license suspensions for violations that don't involve dangerous driving. When the bills went before the House Public Safety Committee in 2017, City Attorney Siegel was there to testify in favor of the bills, and as we head into another legislative session, I know she'll be there to champion them again. These reforms have the potential to make a real difference in the lives of thousands of people in Minneapolis, and in fact, thousands of people across the state. This wouldn't have been possible without the city attorney's passion for justice and willingness to lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cynthia Protec, Cassandra Holmes, and after that, we'll have Sarah Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Fry, and City Council members for taking the time to hear me. My name is Cynthia Protec, Executive Director of Restorative Justice Community Action and a North Minneapolis resident. I started volunteering with RJCA in 1998 when it was still a neighborhood collaborative program. During the first 10 years, RJCA grew and developed a strong relationship with the City Attorney's Office, addressing nearly 450 cases, adult cases a year. So when Ms. Siegel was appointed, we were hopeful that she would embrace the community-based initiatives of RJCA. Not only has she embraced the work of restorative justice, but her focus on diversion has greatly expanded opportunities for growth in this work. For example, by hiring a dedicated staff person to diversion, the City Attorney's Office has increased our organization's ability to address more cases and have greater impact in our community. Today, our strong partnership with the City Attorney's Office has enabled us to improve and develop opportunities for individuals to choose diversion. When Interact was proposed, RJCA was invited to help shape and administer the program. We facilitate these passionate, honest, and respectful conversations. They have provided opportunities for growth and understanding both for individuals and the Minneapolis Police Department. In order to continue this effective and valuable work, I urge you to reappoint Ms. Siegel. She is a proactive leader who continues to find alternatives to address behaviors for long-term change. Under her direction, the City Attorney's Office is diversifying the criminal justice response to address root causes of behavior, increasing positive community engagement, and keeping individuals from getting more deeply involved in the criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cassandra Holmes, and I'll note that we've been joined by Councilmember Gordon.
Bonjour, Niwen Makwa Ikwe Indigenous Cause, Makwa Indodeum. Hello, everybody. My name is Four Bears Woman, also known as Cassandra Holmes, and I am Bear Clan. I am a resident at Little Earth of United Tribes, and I also sit on the Little Earth Residents Association Board as a secretary. I am here in support of Susan. We, in the first time in the history of Little Earth, have a relationship with the city attorney. And no other city attorney has come to build a relationship with us outside of Susan. She's also working with us on the recent news in the Star Tribune article that talks about how our Native women are stopped and arrested at a higher rate than any other race. We need this relationship with the city attorney, and Susan is really great with doing that with us. To lose this relationship would set Little Earth back a lot of years, and I'm here to speak for the LIRA board in support of Susan as for the reappointment of city attorney. Miigwech.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Sarah Klein, followed by Carol Arthur and Jean Massey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Fry, and members of the council. My name is Sarah Klein. I'm the Executive Director of Domestic Abuse Project, and I'm here to speak on behalf of and supporting the reappointment of Susan Siegel as City Attorney. Over the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of working very closely with Ms. Siegel on a number of projects that help us look at preventative measures to domestic violence. There are nearly or over 18,000 911 calls annually in the city of Minneapolis that are coded as domestic assaults. And so when we think about the pervasiveness of this issue, we need to look at how to break those cycles of violence. DAP has been honored to work very closely with Susan's office on a number of projects, one of them being the Hotspots Project. Again, a very innovative approach of sending out a family therapist with a police officer to respond to 911 calls that did not result in a police report, the 24-hour hotline, and Gone on Arrival project. Ms. Siegel has been incredibly collaborative, open-minded, always two-way communication in terms of hearing the perspective of a community organization that is on the ground working with clients day in and day out. And she's really looking at preventative measures versus solely prosecution. We value her relationship and partnership and her collaboration and openness to, again, working with us to ensure that we're breaking the cycles of violence. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to point out we've been joined by Councilmember Cunningham. Carol Arthur, you're next, followed by Jean Massey and then Mike Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Fry, members of the council. My name is Carol Arthur, and for 27 years, I was the executive director of the Domestic Abuse Project, so it's right that I would follow Sarah. It's from that perspective of 27 years of experience in working with the city of Minneapolis and city attorneys that I come to you to support Susan Siegel's reappointment as city attorney. During those 27 years, I had the opportunity to work with 4 different city attorneys. It was only when Ms. Siegel was appointed that domestic violence became a focus of the city attorney's office, part of their business plan with goals and outcomes. I want to share with you some of those outcomes that again, from having been the executive director of DAP, I'm proud of because we were partners with the city in accomplishing these outcomes. First of all, in 2005, domestic assaults resulted in a 48% conviction rate. So that meant if you were a victim of domestic violence, only not even 50% of the time could you hope that maybe your case was successfully prosecuted and the abusive person be mandated to go to a treatment program and get some help. Currently, in the last 5 years, that rate is at 69 to 70% of those cases. And that's a result of city attorney's office working with the police department. Rather than blaming them that we couldn't prosecute these cases because, gosh, it was a poor police report and we didn't have the evidence, they work with the police department to make sure that they knew what the elements of an evidentiary tool in a police report would be. So that's one example. Another one is the Gone on Arrival. It used to be that, well, I will tell you that in 2013, 25 Gone on Arrival cases, which we believe many times are some of the most serious ones. These are repeat abusers that are savvy enough to know that if you leave before the police get there, nothing's going to happen because they're not going to go out and look for you typically. So again, 2013, 25 cases were prosecuted. In the last 3 years, over 100 cases were prosecuted. I thank you for the opportunity to testify and wanted to point out some stats, even though Sarah has pointed out the most important thing, that not only are we interested in prosecution, but her office is interested in finding answers that don't include prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we invite Jean Massey, and then Mike Johnson, followed by Michelle Mackenzie.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council, Mayor Fry. My name is Jean Massey, and I'm the Executive Director of Fair Vote, Minnesota. I'm pleased to speak today on behalf of the reappointment of City Attorney Susan Siegel. Minneapolis made history in 2009 when the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled unanimously in its favor and has since become a national leader on ranked choice voting. Yesterday, Santa Fe voters went to the polls to use RCV for the first time. Like this past November in Minneapolis, it was a resounding success, with turnout surpassing expectations, a large percentage of voters ranking their ballots, and newly elected leaders with broad majority support. Santa Fe modeled its system on Minneapolis, which has set the gold standard for how RCV should be enacted in cities and states across the country, from the Bay Area to the state of Maine. Last week, I was proudly on tour in Ontario, showcasing the Minneapolis RCV experience with Canadians eager to replicate our success in their country. None of this would have been possible without the leadership and conviction of City Attorney Susan Siegel, who represented Minneapolis in the legal challenge against the constitutionality of RCV brought by the Minnesota Voters Alliance back in 2007. With implementation of RCV pending in 2009, the City Attorney's Office, led by the newly appointed Susan Siegel, succeeded in obtaining a summary judgment in its favor in January of that year. Susan was determined to obtain a final ruling in the courts that RCV was constitutional before Election Day. She personally wrote the petition for expedited and accelerated review to the Supreme Court. The court granted that petition, which allowed the city to go directly to the Supreme Court and bypass the Court of Appeals. She then led and drafted much of the brief to the Supreme Court and argued the case in court on behalf of the city. The court issued its opinion affirming the city's RCV system was constitutional in July of 2009, allowing Minneapolis to implement its first election in November of that year. Susan worked also closely with the city election staff to develop the procedures for implementing RCV. It's due to her leadership that Minneapolis stands at the forefront of this movement nationally and statewide. It's my honor to recommend her reappointment to the City Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to point out that a while back, and I just didn't see her, we were joined by Council President Bender. Next, we'll invite Mike Johnson, Michelle Mackenzie, and then Julian McFall to speak. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike. I work down here. I don't live down here. But I would like a safe city to work in. I've watched the other public hearing, and I have some concerns how statistics are being used against the city attorney or just being thrown around in general to show disparity, the catchword of the 2000s. I have a graph that shows a 13-to-1 disparity of men being thrown into prison over women, but if that's all I'm digging into, then I can show that one could think that men are uniformly discriminated against. After all, sex is a protected class. But I doubt anybody would join a movement to blow up the criminal justice system over men being thrown in prison more than women. So I just asked to dig into the statistics, and one statistic I'd like to dig into is Minneapolis victim statements breakdown. Break down the crime rate among race, gender, national origin, take robbery victims, rape victims. Find out the description of the perp, make a graph, and present it to us. That way we can know where the weaknesses are. And we can, if we expose the problems, we can fix the problems. After all, I want safe streets for everybody. I want kids to walk out of their house, walk down the street, go to the store, buy whatever they want, and go home without getting shot, dealt drugs to, anything like that. But more importantly, I want justice for victims. I have no interest in excuses for perpetrators. The best witness from last week was a representative from Little Earth. She mentioned that the city attorney would tell her the truth about the problems in the community, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to be told the truth so that they could fix them. And I thought that was the strongest testimony of all. Having said that, I believe the city attorney is competent and of good character, and that's all really it should take. Everything else is just political garbage. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, we'll have Michelle Mackenzie, followed by Julian McFall. I'm sorry, I can't read the printed name very well, followed by Priscilla Brown. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor Fry, and members of the council. My name is Michelle Garnett Mackenzie. I am an attorney and deputy director of the Advocates for Human Rights. We're a Minneapolis-based nonprofit NGO dedicated to engaging volunteers in promoting internationally recognized human rights standards in our home community and in partnerships around the globe. We do support, and I support personally, Susan Siegel's reappointment as Minneapolis City Attorney. The mission of the Advocates is to work to hold governments accountable for human rights abuses and violence against women, ensure asylum seekers have a fair day in court, prevent human trafficking, and many other issues. And we have had the opportunity to work for more than 5 years with the city attorney to end human trafficking. Ms. Siegel has provided extraordinary leadership to both the city and statewide initiatives. She's ensured that Minneapolis's expertise and practical innovation is developed, it's sustained, it's shared. She has provided essential insight as a prosecutor to the development of Minnesota's Safe Harbor for Sexually Exploited Youth Act, to the subsequent No Wrong Door system. She's the only city attorney in the state who stepped forward to provide critical leadership in the strategic planning process currently underway to determine our future approach to adult victims of sex trafficking. And in addition, she's contributed to our emerging understanding of the legal response to labor trafficking and exploitation. Through her leadership, the city's, I understand, has secured funding to hire a robust, or create a robust response to this problem by hiring an additional staff person to coordinate those efforts. She's responsive to concerns, and her inquisitive, practical approach really drives collaboration towards solutions. Recently, following the passage of the U visa ordinance, I contacted her with concerns about how her office had been operating on these issues, and she immediately responded, convening a consultative process with other city officials and NGOs to bring the right people in and talk about that and find ongoing collaboration. So we support that reappointment and are proud to be here with her. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Julian, who's come to speak. If you could correct your name for me.
Yes.
Thank you.
My handwriting is atrocious. It's Julian McFall. Perfect. 3448 16th Avenue South. Thank you, Chair and members of Council, for the opportunity to speak briefly on the reappointment of the city attorney in question. I just had a couple of concerns that I'd like to voice for your consideration, and which you probably already heard. The city attorney first came to my attention back in 2012 with what many in the Occupy Homes movement at that time felt were disturbingly aggressive riot charges against some of the protesters who were engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience. And we had been there to protect people that were in danger of imminent eviction, who were longtime homeowners. And those charges were just very surprising and concerning to me and others at the time, although I was not personally involved in those cases. A few years ago, I just have to say I was dismayed by what I would characterize as it seemed unfairly biased opposition to two very popular charter amendments that were in support of initiatives that people in the city were trying to push. And that was the raise of the minimum wage in Minneapolis and this proposed individualized insurance for police officers as some way to try to find accountability for misconduct in the force. I'm also familiar with some of the charges outlined in the letters from the National Lawyers Guild and the Community for Professional Policing that I'm sure you're aware of. And these charges, I would just say, should be cause enough for maybe us to consider searching for other candidates for the office of city attorney. It was concern enough for the people of Minneapolis that a number of us who formed a progressive caucus, I'm a member of Twin Cities, Our Revolution, we voted on making it a priority, our general membership, to find other appointments, to consider other appointments to the office of city attorney. So just respectfully, I would ask that you do that. We came out in droves in 2017 to the caucuses, conventions, and polling stations to oppose politics that the city attorney Siegel in some ways I don't understand seems to have taken on in the last decade. Her appointment would signal to some of us that basic priorities about who this city, will serve haven't changed. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. We have Priscilla Brown, Alan Morrison, and then Lolita Uola. We have 5 total speakers left. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mayor, and City Council members. I am the program manager for our Pathways program with Urban Ventures, and we are definitely in support of reappointing of Susan Siegel. It was because of her heart and vision and dream that she devised a alternative to young men between the ages of 18 and 25 who are caught for first-time gun carriers without a permit. We are working with those young men in such a real and holistic way, providing our alternative to a 30-day jail sentence that we are touching their lives in a way of a clinical, social, physical, and spiritual way that is making a difference in their lives and hopefully in the roles that they are also portraying to their families. So we definitely support the reappointment of Susan, and she's been a great person to work with in the vision of this program. In fact, our agency organization is looking at expanding the program because we are having such good feedback with the young men that we're working with and have been working with over this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alan Morrison, Lolita Uola, and Omar Jamal. Welcome.
Yes, hello. My name is Alan Morrison, and I'm here to oppose the reappointment of Suzanne Siegel. In 2014, I was a victim of police brutality. Upon filing a complaint, the city started retaliating against me. I gave you a handout of a check. My vehicle was towed into the impound lot, and it was robbed of over $4,000 worth of tools. Also, in my case, since the city knew that they had messed up, they proceeded to charge me with obstruction. Now, obstruction is a ticketable offense. Instead, I was choked unconscious and hauled away to jail. The city, in my 2 cases, has violated rules of discovery, data request, in my federal and my criminal trial. I give you a handout to show what the policy is. So at this point, also with the parents, the men, the city attorney's office also discriminate against fathers, against low-income males, especially men of color. So in some of these domestic abuse allegations, they coach the victim on what to say, and sometimes commit perjury. So it's ridiculous with some of the things that the city attorney's office. I fear the city attorney's office. I fear the police. I more than I fear thugs in the street. So I would really, really oppose a reappointment. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to give you assurance that we all have your statement up here and a copy for everybody. Next, we have Lolita Uola, Omar Jamal, and then our last speaker will be Beth Holger Ambrose. Good morning.
Good afternoon. How are you? Mayor, I am really honored that I'm here to speak on behalf of Susan Siegel's reappointment to the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office. I've known Susan for 25 years. I am currently the Civil Deputy for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and I also come on behalf of Mike Freeman in his support of Susan's reappointment. I've known Susan in 25 years, and most of our work has revolved around policies and procedures for victims of crime, specifically domestic violence and sexual assault. In part of our work, we have collaborated and met, initiated, created, applied for grants, all with the purpose of finding justice for crime victims. What you don't know about Susan and hasn't been spoken about from some of the speakers today is She's very bright, sharp, intelligent, thoughtful, patient, much more patient than I am. She is a collaborator. She solicits information, and she makes really thoughtful decisions. We have collaborated, I cannot even count how many grants, all for the purpose of bringing justice to crime victims in Minneapolis and in collaboration with the county. Her DV efforts are, you can see, through the Domestic Abuse Service Center, which is part of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, but is a collaboration of 13 different organizations, including nonprofits. And what the City Attorney's Office has done with Susan's leadership has been to not only provide resources to bring justice to victims, but also she has participated in many policies which will look at victimization for many victims, especially those with domestic violence. I would say that there was one comment about DV victims being coached by Susan and her staff. In my 25 years of knowing her, she has the highest ethical responsibilities, and she has never, ever, have I ever seen or questioned her ethics or her office's ethics. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Omar Jamal, and then Beth, Holger, Ambrose, and those are the remainder of those we have signed in. Mr. Jamal, if after this you could give your address to the clerk for the record,
Yes,
that would be
Omar
appreciated.
Jamal,
Thank you.
277 Selby Avenue. Thank you, Madam Chair, City Council members, and the Mayor. I'm not going to say much. In short, I would like just to express my support in the appointment of Susan Siegel as a City Attorney Office. And in the time where the citizens of the city are losing trust in the system and the governance, I think Susan has exhibited an excellent leadership in restoring some level of trust in the hearts and the minds of the immigrants in Minneapolis. I have personally worked with her in many cases. She was very accessible, and she reached out to victims and people to talk to about how the system works and how to help them understand what's happening to their lives. Therefore, I cannot speak much about what we have been through with the City Attorney Office here in Minneapolis, and if we do, we can be here till tomorrow. But in short, I cannot say more, that immigrants in Twin Cities, and especially Minneapolis, are now in a very precarious position, and having worked with the City Attorney Office and the leadership of Susan Siegel, I think we are getting there. Of course, there's always shortcomings because the institutions are run by humans, but we're learning and we support the appointment of Susan Siegel. And I can see a lot of faces. I know David Kushner is there, Lily Graham, and people I've worked in and as activists in Minneapolis. But I'm here to express my support of the appointment of Susan Siegel as City Attorney Officer. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Beth, Holger, Ambrose.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee and Mayor Fry for allowing me to come and testify a little bit. My name is Beth Holger Ambrose. I'm a citizen of Minneapolis, and I also work for an organization called The Link, which is based in Minneapolis, North Minneapolis. We are a youth and adult-led nonprofit that provides programming in 3 aligning areas of juvenile justice, alternative programs, housing and services for youth and young families experiencing homelessness, and shelter, housing, and services for youth who have been sex trafficked. I'm here in strong support of the reappointment of the City Attorney Susan Siegel. She's a very humble leader dedicated to our community. What I've experienced working with her, as well as our staff and youth, is that she works tirelessly on so many large issues, but always has the time to listen to youth and or victims of crime, victims of sex trafficking, and she works really hard to help the larger systemic issue be prevented, as well as help those who have been victimized by it. She's been an incredible partner. She's very ethical and supportive of our community and some of our most vulnerable populations of youth. And so I'm just hoping that you'll consider her reappointment in a favorable light. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That completes the list of registered speakers. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the committee today? Please come on up and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Jan Nye. I live at 2112 Portland Avenue South in Minneapolis. Ms. Siegel has unquestionably done some good things. She has the power and the budget to do these good things, as anyone would in her position. I will remind everyone that Minneapolis remains the most racist city in the country, based on statistics of incarceration and joblessness in the Black community, as well as poor education of Black children. Okay, I won't belabor what other people have said, but Ms. Siegel's partial payback of $250 for a ticket worth at least $1,000 I find very troubling. What was her thinking on this? Why was she allowed only to pay $250 back? Would an ordinary Joe be able to just pay just part of a fine from the city? Does Ms. Siegel think that she wasn't totally guilty? That is, not $1,000 worth? There's a disturbing double standard here, and this is the justice of the privileged. I'm baffled by another double standard. The city of Minneapolis has rules, of course, and pages of rules about proper procedure. These rules are aimed at maintaining transparency and a level playing field for people who want to be involved in their government. It appears more and more that council members, the mayor, and yes, Ms. Siegel, feel that these rules can be used or not at the whim of the conveners. Knowledge of the rules pertaining to how many votes it takes to pass something onto the next committee in the process would seem to be a minimum requirement of committee members. Now, community members are required to follow many rules and face consequences when they don't. Because of the power held by people in high positions, they should be held to a higher standard. This is obviously not true in Minneapolis, where the city council just voted themselves a $10,000 a year raise without any public input. I highly recommend that Ms. Siegel not be reappointed. I think we can find someone much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the committee today? Please come forward, give your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Nick Espinosa, 609 Jefferson Street Northeast, and I'm here to speak in opposition to the reappointment of Susan Siegel as city attorney. A few years ago, I was charged with gross misdemeanor rioting as a result of a home defense action where people peacefully sat down and linked arms to prevent an unjust eviction with the group Occupy Homes. That work went on to help pass statewide foreclosure prevention legislation for thousands of families across the state. And these kind of repressive charges against activists put our democracy at risk and are an attack on movements that we need to push for the equity we want to see in our state. There's no question Ms. Siegel's done great work in her term as our city attorney, and it's not to diminish any of that work, but there is an expectation when somebody's receiving the kind of paycheck with public dollars that she is, that they perform well. And there are plenty of women and people of color and great attorneys across this country that would be drawn to our city with a payment of that sum. So I'm sure we can do better. It's not to say that Siegel is a terrible attorney, but we can do better. And that was the vision that people ran on in 2017. And that's the vision that we expect our council members to put forward in the decisions that they make. This is one of the first big decisions our council is going to make, and I hope that they will do the right thing on this. Another concern I have with this is that there has not been public hearings that are available to working people who are not well-paid professionals that can come here during the day and testify. I think there are a lot of people who feel strongly about this that would like to have an opportunity to weigh in on this appointment. I think it is worth considering a public hearing in the evening at least for other people to participate. And I would say this: if we are going to move forward with this appointment, there are a lot of other opportunities for good progressive work to be done. But this is a very disturbing sign as one of the first major decisions of our first council. And I hope 2 years from now we have a more open procedure to do a full search to find out who's best qualified for this position and who's most in line with the progressive vision that we need to close our worst in the country equity gaps here in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the matter of this reappointment? Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak today? Okay, with that, I will now close the public hearing. That completes the business on our Enterprise Committee's agenda this afternoon. This committee will be submitting its report, including the full public record on this matter from the continued hearing, to the full City Council at its meeting this Friday, March 9th at 9:30 a.m. Thank you to everyone who came out today to participate in this process. And with that, we are adjourned. We're going to take a few minutes here to change over some seats to start Committee of the Whole. Thank you.